Let's look at this extraordinary story about the Nottingham killer Valdo Calocane, who is among violent prisoners allowed to claim benefits, according to a story by The Telegraph. They put in a Freedom of Information request, and the hospital that is holding Valdo Calocane, which also held Ian Brady, the Moors murderer, said it was, quote, standard practice for criminals like Calocane to get benefits because they had not been handed prison sentences and instead were treated as patients because of their mental disorder. Just to explain that in financial terms, so unlike prisons where benefit claiming is not allowed, actually Calocane and others could be claiming £390 a month in universal credit payments because it covers their basic bed and board, is already covered by the state, but they're able to claim this before their release because they're entitled to these benefits because they're in this mental institution as opposed to a prison. So if you counted that up over the course of 20 years, that could amount to £93,000 in current universal credit rate, which means £93,000 of taxpayers' money could be spent on this killer. Let's just remind ourselves of who lost their lives in this. He murdered 19-year-old students Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar, and school caretaker Ian Coates, who was 65. Don't also forget that his case was downgraded by the Crown Prosecution Service. So the families of the victims wanted him to be tried for murder, but he wasn't tried for murder. He was tried for manslaughter due to his diminished responsibility. And that is why he is in that secure hospital rather than in a prison. Let's bring Emma Webber, who's mother of Barnaby Webber, into the conversation now. Lovely to see you, Mrs. Webber. Look, before we get into this case, how are you doing? How's your husband, Dave? How's your son, Charlie? I know you've done a lot of media, but at the end of the day, you're a grieving mum. So let's just establish how you're getting on, first of all.
Hi, Camilla. Well, first of all, call me Emma, please. How am I doing? I honestly, hanging on by my fingernails. I always say that, but it's true. We're in a situation we should never be in. It's because all of it's just heinous. It's just horrific. And I'm speaking to you from a hotel room in London because I've been up here today from Somerset, meeting with the CQC for the outcome of their investigation into Calocane's handling, management from the Mental Health Trust, and also with the IOPC with regards to the failings of the police forces. So that probably says it all. You know, we're trying our best. We shouldn't be here, but we are. But because we're being listened to, I feel grateful, you know, for people like you inviting us on, because we have to be heard, because this is so wrong. It's so wrong, right?
It's so wrong. Tell me what your reaction is to this story based on a Freedom of Information request. I mean, the idea that Calocane could be receiving taxpayers' money in benefits strikes me as perverse. I think the GB News audience will be absolutely horrified by it. So goodness only knows how you, as Barnaby's mother, feels. What's your reaction to this story?
I think the word perverse is perfect. It sickens me. It sickens every family member that's had their lives shattered by Calocane, and he's a murderer. You know, we've been very public with our criticism of the way he was treated prior to the arrest, prior to the attacks, and also subsequently. And I think the fact that this individual is treated as a patient, he's not treated as a murderer. There's no punishment. There's no penal element to anything. And on top of that, he's costing us as taxpayers best part of £300,000-400,000 a year to keep him in his secure unit. And then on top of that, he's getting thousands of pounds a year in benefits that he's entitled to, whereas we as families aren't entitled to anything. We are not entitled to more than 12 paid for therapy sessions by the Victim Support Service that's funded by the Ministry of Justice. I think it says it all. It's something is really wrong here, and it needs addressing.
Will you be lobbying the next government, whoever that may be, to change this? Because obviously there are rules in place for prison, but I do agree with you entirely. This should be based on the nature of the crime, regardless of the mitigating factors that are named in court by the perpetrator's legal team. This man has claimed the life of your son and 2 other people. Therefore, why on earth is it even a consideration that he should receive any further taxpayers' money?
I think it's not just Calocane. I think that there are dozens, if not hundreds, of other perpetrators of very serious, heinous crimes, and I use the word crimes on purpose, that are in receipt of these benefits. And this isn't news to us. We've known this for months and months, and we've questioned and questioned, and we've had evasive answers from the government. And thankfully, a diligent investigative journalist has highlighted it, and it's caught the news today. Wouldn't even really know how to begin with all the failings that there have been, but this is just one of them, and we have to highlight that. I think we're heartened by the fact that it's been raised, and that there's public concern about it, there's governmental concern about it, and we've been assured by the current government, we've been assured by the prospective new government, if Labour get in, that it's an immediate, urgent concern that they will address. And we're not going to stop, because we do not believe that Valdo Calocane is an unwell person. We've never disputed the fact that he's mentally unwell. However, even in the notes of the arrests and presented at court, he knew what he was doing. He knew it was wrong, but he did it anyway, and he planned this heinous murder. Trust me, half of the facts haven't even come out yet, and when they do, and I hope it'll be by way of a public inquiry, I really hope maybe we are that case that changes the law so that other families don't have to go through this devastation. And it's just the bitterness and the poison that's added when you learn it's all in his favour. He's treated as a patient. There's a lot of concern about his medication, his treatment, his activity programme, about reducing him from high security to medium security and letting him out in the community. That worked well, didn't it? Because this is somebody that's been diagnosed for 4 years. Well, now 3 years last year. And look at what he did. So,
I mean, anyone watching this, Emma, anyone watching this has been so touched by this case. They've been so touched by the stories that you've told about Barnaby and Grace, and indeed Ian Coates' family. Also, Charlie, I mean, I read the piece that he did with the Mail, I think it was last week. What a brave son you have in him, keeping Barnaby's memory alive. What can we do to help here? Because we could have a Prime Minister in place on Friday who used to be the Director of Public Prosecutions, as he likes to remind everybody, Keir Starmer. Do you want to make a direct appeal to him on this show? What do you want to say to him? Because it sounds to me as if you think this whole criminal process has been weighted in favour of Calocane, against your family, against Grace's and Ian's family. So speak directly to the Prime Minister, and, we'll make sure his team get the next Prime Minister, potentially, and we'll make sure his team gets this message. What do you want to say?
I think, firstly, Charlie's my absolute hero, and the fact that he's able to speak like that makes me so proud of him. And trust me, we don't let him do that kind of thing lightly. But he said to me, Mum, after he spoke to the Daily Mail, he said, Mum, that actually helped. It made me feel better because his voice is being heard. He's 16, nearly 17, so he's got a voice and it needs to be listened to, not just us in our middle age and via our lawyers. We've had the opportunity to speak to Keir. We've had the opportunity to meet with him and the potential shadow cabinet. We've also met with the current incumbent and government. And I do think they're listening. I think they're listening because there's so much public support and media support for us. And I don't think for a second, with respect to both parties, that we'd get so much attention if it weren't for the public and media support of us. And so we're not going to stop. And so Keir said 3 times now in the last 7 or 8 days that he is behind a public inquiry. And I think the last thing we want is years of this being extended and years more pain. But if it means we get the answers, and if it means we can question and challenge some of the, quite frankly, ridiculous decisions that have been made at very senior levels in the CPS and the police force and the NHS, then if that's what it takes, then that's what we're going to have to do, because I think that's the only way we're going to get answers. Because I can't give details, but we've had an indication today that, the various agencies do close ranks and they're silos and they deal with their terms of reference and their little bits. But, no one's looking at the holistic picture here. Nobody's saying, hang on because it will happen again. It's not a case of an isolated incident, unfortunately.